This is Bharat FM.
बजेगा भारत झूमेगा भारत.
ये है भारत FM.
बजेगा भारत झूमेगा भारत.
Good morning, America, and good evening, India. Thank you, audience, for joining us today for Connect for a Cause in Bharat FM. Today, we are here for a very special and noble cause about Ashley House and other shelter homes which Dr. Kalyani Gopal and Honorable Harold D'Souza is collaboratively and independently working on them. So let me give you a brief introduction about Dr. Kalyani Gopal. Dr. Kalyani Gopal is a clinical psychologist. She is the founder president of Safe Coalition for Human Rights and president-elect Society of Clinical Psychology Division 12 of the American Psychological Association. Dr. Gopal is the president of Mid-America Psychology and Counseling Services with clinics in Indiana, Illinois, and Florida. She is a graduate of Delhi University and the National Institute of Mental Health and Neurosciences, Bangalore. Welcome, Dr. Gopal. Our second guest for the show is Honorable Harold D'Souza. Mr. D'Souza, having his roots from Bangalore, India, born and brought up in Vadodara, Gujarat, traveled to United States. He shifted to United States in 2015. He got a victim of human trafficking, and then his journey starts. He fought very hard. He fought for his life. He fought for his family. He fought for himself. And after fighting his case, he won the case, and he was elected by President Obama, the associated member in Human Trafficking Advisory Council in White House. He was again re-elected by President Trump. He is a board member to many NGOs and a counselor to many government institutions. Welcome, D'Souza.
Thank you, Hriday.
So before we go to our main objective about SLAUs, let us talk about Dr. Kalyani Gopal and which about their life, about their background. So when we talk about Dr. Kalyani Gopal's bio, we have seen that she has done her bachelor's and master's in psychology. She has worked in psychology. So this question is for Dr. Gopal that, ma'am, what made you think that yes, I can pursue psychology or I have to pursue psychology in that young age? You've done your graduation in psychology. So what was the factor behind that?
I think the reason I got into psychology is because I'm a part of the military families. So my father was in the army. We traveled a lot. And every time we traveled, I was changing schools. So by the time I graduated, I was in 14 schools. So, so I think each school was an exposure for me for new people, new kinds of behavior and so forth. It was very interesting. So I got to meet so many different kinds of people, so many cultures. And that really got me involved in psychology.
So when I was in school, I didn't know about any mental illness. So what was your thought? How did you get into the psychology, or you want to pursue the psychological thing in future? Because as a child, no one knows about mental illness. Nowadays, people are talking about mental illness. Many star celebrities are talking about mental illness on national media. At that time, there was no awareness of mental illness. So what is there was any situation in your life that you came to know about mental illness, or you were a geek reading book and getting knowledge from there? What was the main factor?
So when I was traveling to these different schools, I had friends who were struggling with social relationships, struggling with their own family situations. I had one of my friends was so badly anorexic that she was very skinny and she was not eating properly. So a lot of people I met had a lot of mental illnesses and mental issues. And I think that they gravitated towards me and they would talk to me about their problems. So if everyone's going to talk to you about your problems, you end up kind of moving towards that field. And I think that's what happened with me. It's just that everyone came and told me their problems, and I was like, okay, fine. And it wasn't that hard to, help them out. So it's almost like the field selects you, right? More than you selecting the field.
So apart from selecting the field and working in psychology, what made you open your NGO and work for the survivors and victims globally? What was the noble thought behind that?
That's such a great question. So when I was working in the US, right, I've been here for about 25 years. So when I was working earlier, I was basically a graduate student. And there's a 7-year-old girl who came and sat in my lap and she said, my daddy's touching me. And I hope I'm not shocking your viewers or anything, because I know this is a very, very delicate subject. So I'll be careful what I say. But that I didn't know how to react. And that was my introduction to child sexual abuse. And subsequently, what happened is that I started working in foster care fields. So I saw a lot of children in foster care in the US. I wrote a couple of books on foster care, one of which is Nurturing the Traumatized Child. So all my cases began coming from all over the country on child sexual abuse. So there was cases from California where they had a case of forensic child sexual abuse with a huge church involvement. So once that happened, I found myself segueing into human trafficking because of the children missing. The teenage girls were missing. So they'd be in foster homes, they'd come to me to see me, but they'd end up missing. So I didn't know what was going on at that time. I had no idea it was human trafficking. But so finally what happened, I think, long story short, is that this one young lady called me from Chicago, from a payphone. In those days, we used to have payphones in Chicago. And she called me and she said, Doc, come pick me up. And I said, no, I'm not going to pick you up. Go home, go back to your foster home. I'll never forget that, because that really is my motivation almost 99% of the time when I work with victims of human trafficking. Don't neglect and don't ignore what they say to you. But that segue from teenagers disappearing to finding out why they're disappearing led me into human trafficking. And then the NGO came about because there's so little psychological trauma addressed in the human trafficking field. They talk about it, but they're not really trained in it.
Yes.
I mean, just looking at PowerPoint slides doesn't train you in trauma, You have to actually be trained in the field. And there's very few psychologists in the field. So that's what got me involved more deeply. And that's when I opened the NGO.
So what's your NGO called?
It's called Safe Coalition for Human Rights. And it
Okay.
really came about, when we had a conference in Illinois. So I'm part of the Illinois Psychological Association. And we had a conference back in 2013. And when we had the conference, I had two psychologists, me and another psychologist. And then we had about maybe 4 victims of human trafficking, all women. And they all got dressed up because they figured, okay, we're going to see doctors, we better be nicely dressed. They went out, bought outfits, everything else. And then they came to this event at the Marriott. And then they found that there's only like 4 or 5 or 6 people sitting in the room. And next door, there's a huge football event. And football moms, I don't know if you know much about football moms, but they're quite involved, let's just say. So it was very loud. And it was very soft and gentle in my office. And not my office, in my conference room with a symposium. So I took them for lunch because they were all crying, because they said, no one heard us. It's almost like you're shutting down the voices of victims. And Harold and I have talked so much about, making the victims' voices actually heard. And subsequently, what we did, took them for lunch, and I said, this year, not many people heard you, but come next year, the whole world is going to hear you. And that's when that happened. We had a conference. We had about 10 countries that we broadcast to, didn't charge anything at all. And that's how the Safe Coalition came about.
Okay. So as you mentioned, human trafficking, the name of a person comes in my mind is Mr. D'Souza. So I would like to ask the question, Mr. D'Souza, that, sir, you are working in human trafficking since so many years. You opened your NGO. What do you think is the main cause of human trafficking in USA and in India? Sir, you are on mute.
Sorry, my bad. I think the main reason for human trafficking, especially I would say countries like Mexico, Guatemala, India, Pakistan, Nepal, is that like America is the destination and these countries are the source and in transit. But see, very well in India also, like everybody says going to America is like going to swarm, heaven or paradise, which is a fact. And I myself is a victim of that. But having said that, I think that educating like what you're doing today and what Dr. Gopal is doing today, like, empowering victims globally. And most important, I want to say about the psychology or counseling, which you said in your beginning of the presentation, that what inspired Dr. Gopal to start at an early age. And that's a very powerful question. Today, individuals like you, and including all over the world, not only in the United States of America, even in India, it's a stigma. People do not want to go for counseling. But even for me, when I was told by my FBI agent and by service provider that, Harold, you need to go for counseling, I said, these people are like not understanding my problem. But on the contrary, I think they knew my problem, but I never knew. For me, counseling from India was like a stigma. But I today strongly recommend every victim, survivor, or any person, even if you're a normal person, but if you're going through any problem like unemployment, depression, broken relationship, counseling or having psychological therapy is healing. Like when you get like COVID right now, right? You go for treatment. You have an appendix, you go for treatment. So there's nothing wrong. You're just treating yourself. Dr. Gopal treated me, I think a month back or a couple of months back on trauma healing. Like she does very good. I think maybe she'll talk in the presentation. And I felt really good. Like I'm telling you, I'm a real live example, like she did that to me. And it has changed my life. So that's all I want to share. Thank you.
So, sir, as your NGO is working on human trafficking, I would like to address our audience that what it is called and where are your NGO's branches and how can anyone get associated with it?
Yeah, so this I started like this. Basically, it is now. I said, is our organization, it's your organization, Eyes Open International. And like Dr. Gopal said, I had no plans of starting this. And Dr. Gopal, I don't know if she remembers this. She is one of the instrumental delegates who inspired me to start this non-profit. And I still remember that with my family, I was brainstorming to start a name. And I had Dr. Gopal, in fact, contacted me before that for a SAFE conference at Washington, D.C. and flew Dancy and me for the conference as a keynote speaker. So thank you very much, Dr. Gopal. But but I realized, Hriday, that I could not reach to a lot of people. So when I do a presentation, it's maybe like 500 delegates or 1,000. And I wanted to reach out to especially countries like Mexico, Guatemala, Ghana, Pakistan, India, Nepal. And that idea just hit me that I need to start a non-profit. It was never in my vision. Like I never thought about it. And it was God's plan. And today you're there as a regional director for India, Hriday Raval. So we are very proud and happy what you're doing for Eyes Open International. We have I think 500 volunteers all across the world. And we are planning to open branches in 50 countries. So today we have branch in India, friends. It's Eyes Open Trust because for various government protocols and policies, we could not keep Eyes Open International. So we have Eyes Open Trust. It is registered. So people can make donations. Hriday Raval is the managing trustee. We have Rachna Raval as the trustee there. And we have a lot of delegates. I have a branch in Canada. Fiona Dixon is the regional director. We have a delegate in UAE, Desma D'Souza, who is based in Dubai. And so we are opening branches in many countries like Nepal, Pakistan. We have a lot of ambassadors right now working. Like in Pakistan, we have Bilal Ahmed who is working. We have delegates in Nepal. So I think I always believe that all long journeys start with a small step. And I always said, it's a teamwork makes the dream work. So it is nothing about, it's not my organization, it's all your organization, and we are very transparent. So we have empowered I think hundreds of thousands of victims, globally. So thank you, Hriday, thank you, Dr. Gopal, for what all you all are doing for the community and for the vulnerable population. Thank you.
So this question is for both of you, but first I would like to ask Mr. D'Souza to answer this question. Sir, what was the first thought when you met Dr. Kalyani Gopal? When did you guys met and what was the first thought? What was your impression of Dr. Kalyani Gopal when you met?
I never met her for the first time, but the first time I remember I was in this house, I think, and she called me, and it was late afternoon. I don't know the time, but I know it was afternoon. I get a call on my cell phone or on my landline, and I'm just talking and just like I'm so and so, and I just didn't know with whom I'm talking, But she was so humble and she was so cool, still charming like that. But I didn't have any clue. But she said that she's organizing. She heard about me, and she was highly inspired. I don't know from where, and she wanted to invite me for a conference of Safe CHR to Washington DC, right? And she wanted me to be a keynote speaker. And there were delegates from all over the world. It was not a small conference. It was in I would not even say 5-star or 7-star hotel, very well organized. And from there, it started, Hriday. So that was my first call with her, and I didn't know to whom I'm meeting. I didn't know, like, I had no vision, like, or visualize, like, who this lady is. And I had nothing. That's it. But she was so compassionate, cool, and caring. And the best thing I like what Mother Teresa says, do not waste time judging people, just love them. And that's what she does with all the victims and survivors, not only with me. Like, I've seen her experience. So she's very unique. And that's how Nancy and myself, we flew to Washington, D.C. That is the first time we both flew together.
Okay.
And we met her there, and the event was a big success. And that's it. And that's history. Then today we are like family friends. We collaborate together, like Safe CSR, Ashley House, the shelter home. And I think Dr. Gopal is the best to speak about. We are planning to, or basically she's planning to start a male shelter home for immigrants, and even for the local people. But that is the focus. Thank you.
So, Dr. Gopal, what was your thought about Mr. D'Souza when you first met?
I think he's very charming, of course. And
Yes.
what I really love about him is that he is so deeply passionate about the field. I mean, it's very, very difficult just being in my field. I can't even imagine, quite honestly, how much trauma each time he has to speak about this. It's like flashbacks you get about what happened to you, right? And I have never gone through it, so I don't know. But I mean, I'm always humbled by his greatness and the aspect that, no matter how stressful it is, he will go out and he will save another Indian boy, another Indian man, another person from another country trying to come to the US under false pretense. I have no idea, and none of us do, about just how many millions of people he has saved just by putting himself out there. This is a daily passionate struggle for him. Daily passionate. It's not a struggle, I'm saying a mission. It's a daily mission for him to save young men and boys and women also from coming into this country under false pretenses. And so many people come. We have so many Koreans and Vietnamese and Guatemalans and Mexicans and people from other countries coming through the border to this country, thinking they're coming for a better life. But from what Raval has told us all, it's not a better life for everyone. It's a horrific life for some people. So I can only express my deepest gratitude and total admiration for him. He's just a unique, tremendously passionate and tremendously determined person. It's hard to find people like that.
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Gopal.
So, talking about, ma'am, human trafficking and mental illness. So, can you guide us or can you tell our audience that what are the challenges a victim or a survivor of human trafficking, the psychological challenges faced by the victims and survivors?
There's about 5 or 6 major challenges they face. The first challenge they face is the fact that they don't admit that they don't know that victims of human trafficking. If you tell somebody, hey, I'm really sorry you're a victim of human trafficking, they look at you like you're stupid. Because they, in their minds, do not think they're victims of human trafficking. They actually think they're engaging in an activity because they have no other choice, right? So they engage in it, but they don't think they're victims per se. That's one. The second psychological challenge, so that challenge is to have them go through the whole motion of denial, anger, the whole grief process coming to that level. That's the first challenge. The second challenge we have with victims of human trafficking is the fact that they have so much trauma that they've experienced that you have to gain their trust. And with anyone who's been traumatized, gaining their trust is the hardest thing in the planet. I mean, you could talk to them for years and never have them trust you. So and they're very quick at recognizing our facial expressions, our body language. You can't lie. In this field, if you lie, you've lost their trust instantly. So it's very important to know yourself. When you're working with them, you first have to be very aware of your own weaknesses, your own strengths, before you work with a victim of trafficking, because you don't know what level they connect with you that might trigger something that you might have from your past. So people need to be very aware. So that's the second psychological challenge. The third psychological challenge is actually one where they have to go through the process, and there's a massive amount of resistance that comes in. Who wants to deal with the past, right? Who wants to talk about the past? People rather drink, smoke weed, do whatever else they want to, get some ganja, whatever it is. Get out of that mental state of having to deal with your problems. So there's escapism. So that's a third challenge for us when we work with them. How do you deal with escapism? And actually, yesterday, I was at Ashley's house and we had a 3-hour conversation just on escapism and how do you cope with it? How do you handle it? Very intense, but a very good conversation. So you need to address that issue. And then the fourth challenge is working through that and helping them with social supports. So people who are trafficked are very ashamed. They're very embarrassed. They feel dehumanized. They don't know if they're worthy of any help. And they don't know if anybody is trustworthy enough that they can share their personal, trauma and become that vulnerable. So vulnerability is a massive challenge for them. And then the fifth challenge in psychological trauma is rehabilitating them within the society, right? How do you then go back? You've lived a certain life for the past 10 years, 15 years, whatever it is. How do you go back and live a normal life? How do you raise children? How do you parent children? How do you have a relationship? All of that.
So dealing with so many patients on daily basis, what you do for yourself to keep your mind at a stable state or for peace? That because you are hearing the traumatized story of every patient. I see minimum 5 patients a day. So we have heard that 5 traumatized stories. So how did you get fresh after that?
I think
What's the secret behind it?
I have my puppy, my dog, which Harold has met. I have yoga. I can actually shut off my brain thanks to yoga. I've done yoga since I was 3 years old. Very grateful to my father, who's probably listening anyway. So, yoga at 3 years old onwards, when you do it at such a young age, your brain literally learns to compartmentalize everything. I'm so grateful to yoga because I don't do it as much anymore, but I used to. But that's created that brain sort of separation for me and to deal with life, basically. And I think it's great. So much of our Indian culture has helped me in working with traumatized patients. In fact, when I do trauma work, I do a lot of Eastern and Western sort of relationship there. Some of my trauma work is like opening the third eye, for example, which is very non-traditional, non-evidence-based, but works for my patients, so I won't stop doing it.
So you mastered yourself from the beginning, or it was gradually in the process?
What's that again?
So when you join this field, when you start interacting with your patients, so in that first stage only, in that first year, have you mastered yourself to remain peace and to calm yourself down after hearing this traumatic story, or it was gradually in the process you learn how to calm yourself and not to bother about the traumatized
I
story of
think it
other
was
people?
gradual. It was gradual because when I first started, I had so many patients being referred to me. It was like 24/7 sexual abuse, and I couldn't deal with it. So I literally had to shut down because the way you're going through burnout. I went through burnout 3 times, when I was in my younger years. And when you go through burnout, the one thing and burnout is that every patient starts sounding the same. That's really scary. And then when every patient starts sounding the same, there's something wrong with you, not the patient. And so then you have to withdraw. So for a week or two, I wouldn't see any sexually abused patients. I just see regular, depression, anxiety, marital problems, whatever it is, just regular patients. So, and then I'd come back to them. And then I learned over the years to divide my work so that I do half a day of just sexual abuse and trauma and all, just trauma, basically trauma. And the other half of the day, I do regular patients. So that kind of breaks my day and divides my life.
So coming to our main objective of the day, the Ashley House. So can you tell our audience what Ashley House is? What is Ashley House meant for? Who can come to Ashley House and how?
So Ashley's house is a very innovative concept, right? Because we work in the field of trauma. I work in the field of trauma. And one of the things I noticed is that with domestic violence shelters in the US, India, I'm not so sure, but the US for sure I know. Domestic violence shelters in the US take in these individuals so that they sleep there at night. They come back at 4 o'clock. They come into the shelter at 4 o'clock, sleep there during the night. And during the day, they're supposed to go for classes and things like that. Who knows where they're going, but they're supposed to 2 hours of classes, and the rest of the time is theirs. So there's no real treatment of trauma. I mean, especially victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, what happens is they go back to the abuser, and human trafficking especially. They go back to the abuser several times because they don't trust the rest of the system. And sometimes it's easier to be with the known evil than the unknown evil, right? If you know what to expect with certain evil, it's easier to be with that because at least you know what to expect. Then the unknown one, which is a domestic violence shelter that seems so calm and peaceful, and it's frightening. The peace is frightening. So Ashley's House actually addresses all those aspects of trauma, including childhood trauma. So ACEs, which is adverse childhood experiences, is based on a fact of 10 or 11 adverse childhood experiences. I'm actually working with the developer of the initial ACEs, and we've added 12 more trauma factors like sex trafficking, labor trafficking, and so on. But when they go through this, what happens is that they experience intense trauma over the years, and it makes them more vulnerable for later life exploitation. So teenage girls running away from home, red flag for sexual abuse, right? Someone going abroad and not having any contact with you, losing complete contact with you for 6 months to a year, another red flag. Where are they? What's going on with them? So these are red flags we look for. But we are taking these ACEs for these, which is basically what ACEs are. Adverse childhood experience are sexual abuse, neglect, physical abuse, parental incarceration, substance abuse in the family, mental illness in the family. These are the multiple ACEs. And human trafficking, sexually trafficked individuals who take longer to heal, they check off on all 10 ACEs. They literally have all 10. And that is where, so I look at how many ACEs do you have, and let's work with that. Let's resolve your childhood trauma before we even start resolving your adult problematic situations. And so by resolving those early childhood traumatic events, like we did, and I've done with this one individual in the past 3 weeks that she's been with us, I've been working on her childhood traumas, and she's had 5 children. I'm changing the numbers just for protecting her identity. She's had 5 children and 6 boyfriends, and she's been with a guy who basically didn't work at all. He lived off her. He would send her to work, and the kids would be running around like crazy. So there's no parenting going on. Now, this lady now has worked on her childhood ACEs, and today she's going to be moving out in 2 weeks. She's found her own place to live. She's worked very hard on her childhood trauma. She's realized how the sexual assault at 10 years old has impacted her whole life and changed her whole pattern. She was a straight A student, doing really well in school, basically just became very promiscuous after that. And then entered the world of human trafficking and just becoming a slave to the man who used her for everything. So the whole focus of Ashley's House is to work on those childhood traumas, reintegrate them as a personality and a being and their whole view, and taking them from homelessness, helplessness, and a sense of complete loss to a working world and a productive world and ability to be able to actually achieve success. And success comes in small doses, right? So you have small incremental doses of success, and self-esteem builds up. Once your self-esteem builds up, you can face the world.
So I would like to tell our audience that if you want to go to Ashley's or if you want to get to connect to Dr. Kalyani Gopal, then here is number on the screen. That's +1 219 378 7161. 101 is the extension. So if you are facing any problems, if you are victim of human trafficking or a survivor, or if you are having any mental issues, you can contact Dr. Kalyani Gopal on 219 378 7161. 101 is the extension. So Dr. Gopal, right now in Ashley House, how many staff you have, and what is the process of donation? Means how did you get yourself funded by it? How did you run your Ashley's House?
So right now, Ashley's House is being funded by me and Pastor Charles, who's on my board as well. So 2 of us are literally funding all of Ashley's House activities. It's not sustainable in the long run because I can only work so long. I say, if something happens to me, what's going to happen to Ashley's House? So we really need donations, and thank you so much for bringing it up. I'm not a business person. I'm a psychologist, so it's very hard for me to say, you know what, we think we need money. But Ashley's House does need money because I'm doing it on behalf of the survivors who live there. What is so beautiful about my survivors, actually, and I call them more than survivors. They're really thrivers. They're human. They're phenomenal. So these women yesterday were talking to me about going to a soup kitchen and starting a restaurant and starting a soup kitchen and helping other homeless women like them so that they can then get at least food 3 times a day. I mean, that's beautiful. just the way they're thinking now, see how the process they've begun thinking of opportunities, about possibilities. That's hope. And so our staff, in terms of our staff, we have myself, we have Pastor Charles who takes care of spiritual, so it's Hindu, Christian, whatever religion they have. We don't discriminate. So he just does spiritual counseling. What does the universe mean to you? What does the planet Earth mean to you? Kind of more spiritual. I would do the more intensive nitty-gritty trauma work. Dawn Novak, who is a director that Haral met, very powerful young lady, but she's extremely gifted, comes from a history of domestic violence, lost her own daughter who was murdered 2 years ago because of domestic violence. So she's like Haral to me. She's like very deeply invested, and it's a 24/7 for her. I could never pay her enough, quite honestly. And then I have a house mother I just got. Her name is Nancy. And Nancy was once in the trafficking world, but she's now a house mother, and she's running the place better than anyone I could ever imagine with all the degrees. Ultimately, degrees don't matter. Ultimately, it's the heart, right? Heart and soul. Where is your heart and where is your soul? And if you really have the passion and you want to learn, you can learn. Because we have Google, you can learn anything in the planet. So, but you can teach yourself, you can take courses. So it's really these people who form the heart and soul of Ashley's House. And then right now we have a registered nurse who's supervising Nancy because she kind of needs that help. And she also survived of domestic violence, very severe domestic violence. But yeah, that's our staff. Our staff is all survivor staff, except for Pastor Charles and myself.
So it's lovely to know that you help these victims and survivors, and now they are thrived completely, and they are helping other victims and survivors to stand up in the society. So
that's the whole model. The whole model is what I call the victim clinician survivor model. So that person comes in as a victim with a victim mindset. I can't do anything. This has happened to me, and they're very entitled. Give me this, give me food, give me this, give me that. But they go from that sense of gimme, gimme, gimme to what can I do now? How do I look after myself? I'm responsible for myself. What do I do? That transition is very important, but they need so much support because the world has beaten them down. It's when you're beaten down that badly, you don't feel like you can do anything much. And yet they're phenomenal women. They have come through histories that I say I wouldn't have probably have survived from. Like Haral. I mean, I don't know if I'd survived what Haral went through. It's just, they're great people.
So, Harold sir, I want to like to ask you that how your organization, UI and Dr. Kalyani Gopal organization, Safe CHR, are collaborating and have collaborated before. What all projects you have done, and what are your further projects?
Good, Hriday. This is $1 million question. And that's the reason that Eyes Open International is inviting you to the United States of America in the month of December of 2021. So that you can look at the projects here, and we are very passionate, so that you can visit Ashley House in Indiana, East Chicago. And I now want to share something about Ashley House is that it is something very unique. I have visited lots of shelter homes in the US. This shelter home is unique. The moment you enter that house, it's a house. Okay, it's a big house with a good backyard, front yard. The moment you enter the house, you feel that you're entering a happy home, a family. And there are kids, there are single moms. And I want Dr. Gopal to share later on, after I'm done here, is that they do not charge a single penny, to the victims or the survivors. See, it's pretty deep. It's not just a shelter home. It is above that. It's like a mother home. It's like, I don't know what to say. Like, they take care of everything, number one, and they take care till, I don't know, she'll share till, I don't know how long, like a couple of months, the durability where they can stay till they're self-empowered. But how we are collaborating is that in every project, what Dr. Gopal does with Safe CHR and then whatever I do with Eyes Open International, we collaborate. Like if I'm going to India, I'm traveling anywhere, she gets me connected. That's how she got me connected with PM Nair and vice versa. So she believes in collaboration. And I also believe in collaboration. I don't believe in competition, because ultimately, I think our focus, our goal is to empower the victims and survivors, the vulnerable populations and community members to live a happy life.
Yes.
And I've been to the Ashley House a couple of times. And Ashley House, there is a lot of safety, security, and stability. We have to take care of the things. That's why we do not share the address, anything, because we have to take care of this, the house. But whenever you go there, Hriday and friends, it is so empowering for me. I feel like when I listen to their stories, and now they're like smiling, happy, excited, and they treat or they respect Dr. Gopal as their own elder sister or mother, like that type of bonding is there, which is something I cannot express, you know, like how it is. But that is something which you will experience when you're here in December. And that is what I want you to take Eyes Open International or Trust to the next level in India, which I know you're working on a hotline number, you have good support. And that is the overall objective of inviting you here and for a board meeting. So you know exactly what's happening here, and maybe you'll be in a more powerful position to tell people there in India, Nepal, Pakistan, and the surrounding countries, man, yes, do not go to the United States of America undocumented or illegally. I always use the word illegally because that's the way it has been used.
Yes.
So I just want to thank you and Dr. Gopal. So I think we are on the right track. We are on the right path. I think like every second, every minute, whatever we are doing to change the world is important. We cannot wait just for the government. We have to see as a community members what we can do, and we all have the power. Every individual has the power. And classic example is Dr. Gopal. Like what inspires me is that she has never been a victim of any crime. See, I get highly inspired, and she's volunteering her time. When I say time, means she has money. Like she's a professional, she could live a good life, travel all over the world, right? Her kids are doing very fantastic, But she and I, this is a fact. I was at the Ashley House for an event. It was in a big hall, and they are funding money from their pockets to maintain Hriday. Thank you.
Yeah, it's not sustainable. So donations are very welcome. Each resident for me costs $5,000 a month, literally, because by the time we do the transportation, we do security around the clock, right? So we have security nowadays that we've had to hire just to protect the women and also to keep the neighborhoods safe. And so we have security now at nighttime. So that costs us a lot of money because security is not cheap. Then we have therapists, and I do most of the therapy because I can't afford to hire therapists at this point. So I do that, but I really need to hire other people who can take off some of the load from me. And then we have case management that's needed. We have car seats that we have to buy. We have daily Pampers for, we have 7 children under the age of 7 in a house right now. So we have the youngest is 9-month-old. The oldest is 9 years old. So all the other kids are little kids running around. So they need a lot of stuff. Moms need clothes. They come in with nothing but just the clothes in their, that they're wearing. So we get them clothes, we get them toiletries, we do the whole 9 yards for them. It's a lot of work. It's a 24/7 mission, literally. So yeah, we would really appreciate any kind of donations that people give. Nothing is too small, nothing is too large for us. It's just how it goes directly. What I like is that every penny goes directly to the victims, which I really love. It goes to each resident. So for example, someone donated, I think $550 yesterday. Someone gave us a check. That check went towards fixing this woman, the house mother's car, because her car was broken down. She couldn't take her 3 daughters to school, and she couldn't transport the ladies who need to go to the grocery store for whatever women issues. But that car got fixed thanks to the donation we got. If I didn't have that donation, I don't know how I'd fix that car. So these things really help. And then we had someone else who gave us a donation. They paid the rent for that lady for the whole month. So I was able then to, take care of other women because that freed me up to look after the other women. So
Dr. Gopal, sorry to interrupt Hriday and Dr. Gopal. Can you share with our audience in the US and globally also, like if somebody is a victim of any crime, whether domestic violence, sexual abuse, how can they contact and what is the process? Like, do they have to have a status, number one? And do they have to pay anything? And how long can they stay? Thank you.
So there's no status. They don't have to be legal, illegal. We just take anybody who's homeless and who's got a victim of crime or victim of, childhood trauma. If you have a history of childhood trauma, we'll take you in. And anybody who's illegal is probably has some level of trauma involved in their childhood anyway. And so we'll take them in, we'll connect them with the resources so that they can work towards a status or whatever the situation is, find a family, whatever it is. But they can stay as long as they want. There's no limit, but it's up to 2 years. They can stay so the longest someone has stayed with us is 7 months. She's moving to her own house the end of the month. And the shortest span someone stayed with us is for a week and a half. So they can literally stay wherever. And she stayed only for week and a half because she had another place she was able to go to. Her family decided to take her in, so she went.
Is the
But
process very painful? Like they have to fill a form. How are they eligible?
what they do is when they first reach out to us, they call that number that they put up. I will arrange an intake. So they will have to see me because I need to know where they are emotionally, cognitively. I need to know where they are and how much treatment they actually need. So once I do that intake, then Dawn, who is a director, she does a more detailed intake. What are your resources? Who have you gone to before? Because we need to know the history. So she goes into the whole psychosocial, chemical dependency. She's also a chemical dependency specialist. She goes into all of that intake. And then the financial aspects. What do you need? What do you need to survive economically? What do you need? So she goes into all of that. And then when they're in the house, they start working on daily goals. So every day they're supposed to work towards some goal, whatever it is. It could be sleeping for 3 hours because they haven't slept at all. So the goals are basically dependent on what they want.
So talking about mental illness, yes, ma'am. Sorry to interrupt.
Right.
So talking about mental illness, there's a big stigma in men that men don't share their feelings openly. So is there anything that can be done specifically for male victims, or are you planning
Oh,
on something for that?
absolutely. There's so much that's out there because more and more male victims are talking. Not in India, right? In India, men don't talk. In India, it's suicide. Even in this country, it's suicide. Men commit suicide, women get killed. That's the general trajectory. Or men will go to prison because there's so much anger and so much violence that they've experienced. They adapt that some of that violence is a coping mechanism. And then they get caught because in the wrong place at the wrong time. And so men end up going to prison or they commit suicide. Those are two ways. That's why we're trying to get boys young. And if we can educate them in the school system that, you're not alone. If you were sexually abused, you're not alone. There's a lot of other boys who are also sexually abused because pedophilia was very, very strong in all the cultures, in all the religions, right? Especially with priests and boys, for example. There's a huge problem there. And so, yes, with men, intervention is very different because you can't treat them, you can't talk to them when you talk to women, right? Because women we address in a different way, more the emotional, the other aspect. With men, it's almost like, if something happened, it happened. What's our next step? And with men, the male patients I have, I'm very, very down to earth with them. I'm very, I don't address the topic directly to them because it's very offensive. First of all, coming from a female to a male, it's very offensive. So I address it in a very roundabout way, and ultimately they start crying. And then they'll tell me the whole story. And I'm usually the first person they've ever said the story to. So it's a massive release for them. I had one guy who was a physicist, a very famous physicist actually, did very, very well in life. But he had a story of being perpetrated by 5 men in his childhood. 5. And because of those 5 people, he entered into relationships that are very negative. And it was very exploitative. So he was manipulative and very exploitative. And he did all of that, but without consciously wanting to exploit. It's not like he wanted to be a bad person or exploit other people. But that sense of narcissism and the self-protectiveness enters these men. So when I'm looking for clues, I usually can pick up if there's a history of sexual abuse. So I know where to ask next. And then that helps get them to speak. But that treatment is definitely very different than that for women.
So are you planning to open a shelter house for male also?
Yes,
Especially
thanks to Haral's constant comments. He's very good about motivating me to open that. So there's been a huge request in Indiana and around the country also to open a male shelter. But I think Haral is my inspiration because, nobody should go through what he went through. And if he had a place to go to, he would have probably gone. So we're working together on that. And we will keep victims of labor trafficking no matter what their background, no matter what their status, because they usually don't have a status. So we'll keep them. For men especially, there's less chances of having a status. Women tend to, but men don't.
Yes.
So Harold, yeah, that's my inspiration right there.
This is when can we expect this male shelter home?
Yeah, I think I'm pretty excited. I think maybe when you're coming in December, we can inaugurate that.
Yes.
Yeah, with your hands. And I think Dr. Gopal is already started seeing places for male survivor shelter homes. And I think something was to be transferred last week, but I think something will transpire in this month. But I just want to inform all the immigrants and male victims in the US and even globally that, especially in the US, that a male shelter home is coming, especially for immigrants. Now, we'll be taking in the Americans, but I'm not trying to discriminate anything. But I just want to respect that many immigrants are scared, like you said, Hriday, a very multi-million-dollar question, that it's a stigma for male. And it's a reality. I work with so many immigrants here, and they do not want to come out and share and talk, like what Dr. Gopal said. So this will be a good resource for them. That okay, there is some protection, where are we going to protect them? Because law enforcement agency is there for half an hour or 1 hour. So they need some safe home. So this safe home, like which Dr. Gopal is very passionate, I'm very confident that this will happen by the year end. And friends, I am again requesting everybody who is watching this, please collaborate with Dr. Gopal or with Hriday or with Eyes Open International. Email us. And if we have anything where you think we can donate a home or we can start this project, we are almost ready to do that. And Dr. Gopal is the right source or contact for that. Thank you.
So before we wind up for today, is there anything you want to tell our audience? I would like to start with Dr. Gopal. Dr. Gopal, is there anything you would like to tell our audience?
I just want to tell people who have been sexually abused, histories of sexual abuse, or who are currently being trafficked, who have experienced human trafficking, there are multiple physical complications that come up in the older years. So many of them, majority of them have been diagnosed with autoimmune disorders. In fact, I just discovered yesterday that one of the people I'm working with has been diagnosed with stage 2 carcinoma, right? So there's cancer. And so there's multiple diseases that they get, but not to give up hope. There's physical treatments that are fantastic, and not to give up hope on therapy. Please go for therapy. Please reach out to me. There isn't 20 years of talk therapy to do anymore. You can actually be healed in like 4 or 5 sessions. Neuropsychology, the brain, our knowledge of therapy has advanced so greatly in terms of trauma. And we have such wonderful traumatologists in this country, that in the US at least, and in India as well, where you can actually get help. So please don't be ashamed to go and ask for help, and don't be afraid that you've lost hope and become disillusioned, because many people become disillusioned because nothing happens. So please try it, because it really works.
That's very great. Mr. D'Souza, parting words for our audience.
Yeah, I think what Dr. Gopal said, I strongly advocate that, is that please do not be ashamed to ask for help, And I want all my friends there that, always tell, be happy, think positive, never quit, and believe in yourself. Having said that, I want to give my own example, I was struggling to do meditation or yoga, and I could not do it for 10 years. I tried a lot. But eventually, I got a good instructor, her name is Poonam Bhatia. She's in Bangalore, India. So we did a lot of Zoom calls, and it's almost a month that I've not missed a single day in doing yoga or meditation. I've done therapy with Dr. Gopal. Whenever I feel anxious, like she says, like everybody gets triggered. Trauma has no expiration date. So there are very few people, including me, we trust people, So I'm very comfortable with Dr. Gopal. I can talk anything and everything below this planet with her. But that has not happened overnight. That's again I'm trying to tell, So I'm telling even male people who are looking or watching today that, take the baby step. Find out your own resources, find out your own comfort level. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with you. So at times we think that there's something wrong with me. I'm not into that bracket, But no, everything is right with you. But we have to cure ourselves. So once again, Hriday, I really appreciate what you're doing for Eyes Open International and for the community members. You got your own Bharat FM, and we are super excited to host you in December for a couple of events here and to create enlightenment in the community members back in India. And Dr. Gopal, once again, thank you very much. Simple living, high thinking, Dr. Gopal. Thank you.
It was a very wonderful session for our audience, and hope you will be getting many donations soon and support from all the community members and Americans and globally. Thank you.
Yeah.
Have a nice day.
Thank you.